Trigger warning, this video contains stalking. When I was 13 years old, I was stalked severely to the point where it became a federal case. Me and my best friend at the time thought it would be a great idea to walk to the beach. Everything seemed normal until we got home. My friend started getting phone calls on her phone from somebody pretending to be Scream. She hung up and she didn't entertain it. And that's when my phone started getting text messages, and it was really creepy. Back then you could have signatures on your phone, and his signature was always watching. So jokingly I said, since you're always watching, what are we wearing? And he said exactly what we were wearing down to our sock color. Keep in mind that we had just gotten back from the beach and we had already showered and changed clothes. We called the police and they looked around and they couldn't find anything. And that's where things got crazy. Like for part 2, this was 5 years of stalking. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic violence. Part 2. After the police left, the man kept threatening to kill my friend's grandma if we called the police again, saying that he wanted me to come outside and play hide and seek with him. The messages didn't stop. I blocked number after number, but as quickly as I would block one, a new one would just pop up. And I was too scared to turn my phone off because it was clear that he was watching us and the police weren't taking it seriously. I didn't want to agitate him further. I begged for my parents to come and get me. They read the messages, which were very, very disturbing and very explicit and very detailed. They called the police. The police said it was just a boy playing a sick prank. My parents decided to turn my phone off for the day, and very shortly after, my house phone started getting phone calls, so they turned that off, and then my mom's cell phone as well. A few months went on with messages and threats. We changed our number many times, and then one night I was sleeping and I woke up to someone staring at me from my bedroom window with their hand on the door. I screamed, ran to my parents. My dad ran around the house, called the police again. They made another report, and I didn't hear from my stalker for about 8 months. It wasn't until I got my first trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic violence. It had been 8 months and I hadn't heard anything. I was living my best life and I had a boyfriend, my very first. I went over to his house to meet his parents, and on that night I got a text message that said if I didn't leave things would get bad, with the signature always watching. They had a cat that they let roam around outside. Later in the afternoon it was time for my boyfriend's mom to take me home. As we were leaving, when we opened the door, his cat was on the front porch, gutted, with a note that said, "Always watching," written in something red and sticky. Immediately, we called the police. A report was made. My phone was finally taken into evidence, and the note was taken into evidence. They obviously let us keep the cat to bury it. And nothing was done. A few months later, I got my phone back, and they said that the numbers were fake, and somebody was using a computer to change their location, and that there was nothing that they could do. In part 4, things will be very graphic and very violent, so I might take trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic content. After the cat being gutted, the harassment continued nonstop, telling me that I was his and I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend, and next time things would be much worse. My parents got fed up and they cut off my service, and I ended up moving 40 minutes away and living with another family member, new school district, knew everything. My life was normal for about 9 months. Then one day I was walking to the park with my niece and I noticed a man in broad daylight wearing a hoodie, and it was pulled so far down it was covering his entire face, so I was immediately suspicious. I started cutting through trees in a field to see if the man would follow, and he did. I told my niece we were going to play a game and race to the park so I wouldn't alarm her. I picked her up and started running as fast as I could to the nearest house, and I took out my phone even though it was dead and pretended to make a phone call. When I looked back behind us, he was gone. When I made it to the nearest house, they called the police, and the police basically laughed at me and said that type of thing doesn't happen here despite my past. 2 weeks later, I continued my normal routine when I noticed after studying that my key was gone off of my backpack when I made it home. And that is how it all started. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking. At first I just thought I didn't clip my key on properly onto my lanyard and maybe it just fell off and it was random. I retraced my steps and I couldn't find it. 2 days later, it was a gross, cold, rainy day, and I always walked home from school. When I got home right away, I noticed it was really cold in the house. I walked downstairs, stripped my clothes off I had on, and put them in the washer, put shorts and a tank top on. My sister always called, so when the phone rang, I answered without even checking. When I answered, no one said anything, it was just breathing. I realized everything in what felt like a second in slow motion. The windows were all open in my room, and the room leading to mine, the screens were all off, the floorboard above me was creaking, and the phone said, "House phone." I dropped the phone in the back and the battery collapsed out. I ran upstairs, and I saw him just at the top of the stairs running towards me. I managed to somehow make it out the front door just before he could grab me, and I was screaming, flailing my arms around in the rain, in short shorts and a tank top with no shoes in freezing weather. I ran to my neighbor's. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking. I ran to my friend's house who lived across the street, and her cousin ran to my townhouse. My friend called the police, and the police came and took statements that said there was no sign of forced entry. They didn't take me seriously until my neighbor gave her a statement and said she seen a very large man jump off the balcony and run into the cornfield. My aunt finally made some calls and my case was taken on by special agents due to how advanced it was and how little evidence there was. About 2 weeks into investigating my case, I was told how it is suspected that he found me. He saw me and my friend that day at the beach, and while we weren't paying attention, he took our entire contact list and emails from our phones in our bag. He called my friend's phone first and most likely was watching from my friend's open window, and he had already decided who his victim was. They believed his obsession with me had something to do with his past and that he had done this type of thing before. It is also suspected during the periods of time he didn't contact me, he could have been in jail or serving in the military. He was able to find me by hacking my email and my Facebook. 3 years went by and Trigger warning, this video contains stalking, part 7. 3 years passed, my life was normal, new state, new name. I took a plane to go visit family and friends in another state. When I arrived, I couldn't get in contact with my boyfriend, so I just thought it was my service. Meanwhile, without my knowledge, my boyfriend was getting pictures and threats of someone saying they were following me with pictures of them on a plane and the signature always watching. I was pretty jet-lagged, so I went outside for a walk, and out of nowhere, I was bear-hugged from behind and my arms were pinned against my side. I screamed and kicked and did anything I could, and something stabbed me in the leg, and I was immediately dropped to the ground. I took off running as fast as I could and pulled out my phone and called the police. The police looked around, but since this happened in another state and I was only visiting, nothing was really looked into after the day it happened. I had to have 6 stitches. He wore a mask, he used a computer to change his location and create fake numbers. I wonder every day if today will be the day he comes back. That's something I might have to live my entire life with, always looking behind my shoulder, but maybe my story can save someone else.
Story time about my emotionally abusive ex-fiance and his psychotic family. So when I started college, I met this guy on Facebook. And I mean, he was a dreamboat. We hit it off immediately and I knew that he lived in my hometown, even though I was out of state for college. And when I tell you this guy was sweet, I mean, he could put Nicholas Sparks novels to shame. While looking back, a lot of the stuff was cringy. He was my first relationship. Well, one day when we were on the phone, he was talking about how excited he was to be married one day and adopt animals together. I was totally excited about it with him, and he decided to propose on the phone, on the spot. He was like, "Please don't embarrass me. I'm down on one knee in front of everyone right now." And so I just said yes. While I thought this was the beginning of my happy ending, things got worse. He became extremely obsessive and controlling. He would blow up my phone whenever I was in lectures and get a hold of the college admissions office when I wouldn't respond, and would yell at me if I fell asleep because he thought I was ignoring him. I would literally wake up to text about him hurting himself or selling my nudes. I was so scared that he was actually going to do something crazy that I left school and started driving back to my hometown. Once I got there, I met his family and realized just how messed up everything was. You won't believe what happens next. Follow me on Insta in the meantime. Story time about my emotionally abusive ex-fiance and his psychotic family. So once I got to town, I was finally able to meet his family, and he told them that I went to an Ivy League school and got in only because I was autistic, which was just untrue. I immediately noticed that the relationship between his mom and him were completely off. They both had each other as their wallpaper on their phone, and she acted as if she had a crush on him. When we decided to introduce both of our families together, his mom told my mom that she's sad that I don't look more like her because she's beautiful, then proceeded to say that it's nice that her son spends so much time with me even though I'm homely looking. She was also a therapist and claimed that it was her job to manipulate people and control their minds. Yeah, I bet that's the person you want to see when you're down. Because my boyfriend was in the military, when he went back overseas, I was pretty much forced to be on Skype with him 24/7. It didn't matter where I was, and if I didn't respond, he would post horrible things about me on Facebook. Or he would send me videos of cats or puppies getting eaten by snakes to get back at me. I didn't watch them because they were so upsetting, but I was still too scared to leave him, and I was entirely sleep deprived. Stay tuned for what's next and follow me on Instagram. Story time about my emotionally abusive ex and his psychotic family. So I was still not prepared to leave him and had to be on Skype with him all the time, in the bathroom or in the shower. If I refused and asked for privacy, he'd tell me how horrible and how ugly I was, and that he'd end his life because of my cruelty. The only time that I didn't have to talk with him was whenever I was hanging out with his mom. And when I did this, she would spend the entire time talking about him. She would tell stories about him and show me pictures, and in the pictures she took of him, he was either shirtless or sleeping. And the weirdest thing is that she said she taught her son how to be a good lover, whatever that means. She would also frequently tell me that I was going to hell for having sex with him, and she only knew this because she would log into his messages and read them. She talked about my body all the time and tried to give me tips so I could be prettier. This went on for months until I eventually made the decision to break up with him, and I had to move in with a friend because he kept sending scary things to my house. He would send stuffed animals with their limbs or head removed. He would also send empty envelopes, probably just trying to get me to come outside. Not long after this, he sent his cousin to try to kidnap me, and he said that he was doing this all in the name of love. Thankfully, this is over now, but if you have a story you want to share, follow me on Insta.
This is the story for when I ran away from my foster home and the cops. A lot of people wanted me to talk about it, so here I go. I was told that I was being forced to take a blood test, and to this day, I have an absolute fear of needles. In this group home, they hid all of your stuff in the basement, such as my old phone,